everyone, welcome back to Shop Life. This video is a quick video, it's a quick tip video on something that every car owner should do, especially if your car has a lot of mileage on it. So this is probably one of the most overlooked repair maintenance items that most people don't even think about doing, and they just think that they last the life of the car. But they should be replaced almost every 80 to 100,000 miles, sometimes even less mileage depending on the age. And what I'm talking about here is the engine mounts. So engine mounts, and actually the transmission mounts as well, should always be replaced every 80 to 100,000 miles depending on how much they have worn. The higher the horsepower on your car, chances are you need to replace them more often. The heavier the engine, you might have to replace it more often as well. The key signs to know that you need to replace your engine mounts are whenever you start feeling more vibrations throughout the cabin, especially when you're sitting at a traffic light, and also whenever you start noticing more drivetrain movement, like when you're coming to a stop, you might notice like a little bit more clunking or even a little bit more jerkiness when you're just driving around. And that pretty much points to getting your engine mounts replaced. What happens to engine mounts and transmission mounts over time is they start sagging, especially on BMWs and other high performance cars. You're going to notice that your engine mounts start sagging, your transmission mounts start sagging. Sometimes they can even come apart based on their construction. And when that happens, you're just going to have excessive vibrations throughout the whole cabin. There's also a lot of other things that can go wrong whenever you have worn engine mounts. So if you have a rear-wheel drive car with a mechanical fan in the front, whenever your engine mounts or transmission mounts start going out, there's more stress that goes on the actual mount itself once it starts sagging. And when that happens, whenever the engine has a little bit more room for movement, or if there's more movement in the engine itself because the mounts are torn or just worn out, you have the chance of hitting your fan blades against the fan shroud. And when this happens, the fan blades might break, they might go through your whole cooling system, tear your belt, even put a hole in the hood. So this is a quick way to be preventative and make sure that doesn't happen, is to replace your engine and transmission mounts. Now, another thing that can happen when these mounts get worn to the point of a little bit more flexing of the engine or just movement overall is the rest of your drivetrain can suffer. So for rear wheel drive cars or even front wheel drive cars, the axle or the drive shaft might have more movement where it shouldn't be moving, even though there's a supporting bearing in the middle or just having a flex joint with the CV joint. You just run the risk of wearing those other components out prematurely. So engine mounts, transmission mounts, definitely consider them if your car has 80 to 100,000 miles, or if you've just had your car for a while. I would say like 5 to 6 years is a pretty good time span of when you should be replacing these mounts, just because all that weight that's being supported by these mounts, and usually they're just rubber, some of them are oil filled, and it just makes sense to go ahead and replace them. Now, as far as costs associated, most engine mounts and transmission mounts are fairly cheap. They're usually about $100 to $200 for all of them. If you have a front wheel drive car or an all wheel drive car, you might have different mounts or a couple more mounts, and those mounts should still be relatively inexpensive. Labor-wise, it all depends on your engine configuration. So if you have a V8 in a sedan that's a small sedan, your labor is going to be a little bit more expensive because it's just harder to get to. Whenever you're replacing these engine mounts, you usually have to lift up the engine just a little bit. You can usually get away with doing it with the floor jack. Sometimes you actually have to lower the front subframe. On the transmission mounts, it's usually you just support the actual transmission, take off the cross member, replace the mounts, and you're good to go. Now, a lot of people might not even have any vibrations if you have a big car. So I'm thinking like trucks, even like big SUVs. You might not notice these vibrations because you have an entire frame that the actual engine sits on, and the body of your truck or SUV has its own mounts that sit on the frame, which further dampens all those vibrations. But that doesn't mean that your engine mounts and transmission mounts aren't bad. So especially if you have a truck, you do a lot of towing, or if you do a lot of off-roading, you should definitely replace those more often than not, because you're probably not even going to notice if they're bad since you have that extra dampening from the body mounts. Now that pretty much covers my quick tip on something that you should do. It's not going to really improve your engine performance or anything like that, but is definitely going to make a huge difference in drivability and just how the car feels when you're just sitting in it. And also you're going to do a lot of preventative measures as far as preventing other stuff from breaking and wear and tear on other items. I'm going to go ahead and link down some of the videos that we have to show DIYs for the engine mounts. We're going to have another video right after this that goes up for the E90 330i. We filmed a whole video on that, and that's it for this video. But make sure you go on www.shoplifetv.com. We've got new hoodies, new long sleeves, just in time for the cold weather. And we also have quite a bit of a restock on our other graphic tees as well. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in our next video.